Imagine stepping off a long-haul flight, eager to revisit a place that holds some of your favorite travel memories. You walk down the street, expecting the familiar smell of street food, the gentle hum of acoustic guitars, and the clinking of cheap beer bottles on low plastic stools. But instead, the moment you turn the corner, you are hit by a physical wall of sound. The bass is so intense it literally vibrates in your chest. Dazzling neon lights blind you, and dancers on platforms are performing right in the middle of the pavement. You look around, completely disoriented, wondering if you accidentally stepped through a portal into a massive, open-air nightclub.
It sounds like a scene from a cyberpunk movie, but for anyone who has returned to Saigon recently after a few years away, this is the literal reality of walking onto Bùi Viện Street today. It is a total sensory shock. The contrast between what it was just a few years ago and what it has become today is one of the most drastic urban transformations we have seen in Southeast Asia.
It really is. I was reading a message from a traveler who lived in Saigon around 2018 and recently went back for the first time. They were completely flabbergasted. Their text was basically, "What on earth happened to Bùi Viện?" And it made me think about how quickly spaces change. Before we look at why this happened, let us actually paint a picture of the old days for those who never experienced it. What was the classic backpacker era of Bùi Viện actually like?
The classic era was defined by a very specific kind of global bohemian energy. It was the ultimate backpacker hub, right up there with Khao San Road in Bangkok, but with a uniquely Vietnamese flavour. The defining feature was the sidewalk culture. You had these tiny, brightly coloured plastic stools spilled out onto the pavement, almost blocking the road. You would sit so low to the ground that your knees were practically touching your chin. You would buy a cold local beer for less than $1, grab a plate of roasted peanuts or fried tofu, and just watch the world go by.
And the crowd was so incredibly diverse. You could sit down next to a French medical student, a Japanese tech worker, a retired teacher from Canada, and a local university student looking to practice their English. It was a space designed for connection. Because everyone was sitting so close together, conversations happened naturally. You did not have to shout. You would exchange travel tips, share stories about where you were heading next, and swap worn-out copies of guidebooks. It was laid back, budget-friendly, and highly accessible.
It was a true melting pot. The soundtrack of the street back then was a mix of ambient traffic, distant chatter in a dozen different languages, and maybe a street musician playing an acoustic cover of a classic rock song. It was chaotic, yes, but it was a warm, human kind of chaos. It felt intimate despite the crowd.
But then, 2020 happened. The pandemic brought global tourism to a screeching halt. For nearly 2 years, those international travelers who kept the hostels and cheap bars alive simply vanished.
Exactly, and that is the catalyst for the entire transformation. We have to remember that cities are not museums. They are economies. When the international backpackers disappeared overnight, the businesses on Bùi Viện faced a stark choice: adapt or die. They could not afford to wait around for years hoping the global tourism market would recover. They had to find a new audience, and they had to find it fast.
And that audience was right on their doorstep.
Precisely. The local Vietnamese youth and domestic tourists. But here is the thing. The local youth did not want to sit on tiny plastic stools drinking cheap beer while listening to acoustic folk music. That is not their idea of a big night out. They wanted high energy, entertainment, status, and excitement. They wanted the premium nightlife experience that was previously confined to indoor clubs, but they wanted it with the wild, open-air energy that Saigon is famous for.
So the businesses pivoted. They traded the acoustic guitars for massive subwoofers. They replaced the cozy, dim lighting with blinding LED screens and strobe lights. They hired DJs and dancers. Essentially, they turned the entire street into a competitive decibel war.
A decibel war is the perfect way to put it. Because the street is relatively narrow, the sound from one venue bleeds directly into the next. To compete, the bar next door has to turn their volume up even louder. It becomes this escalating arms race of volume, bass, and visual spectacle. If you walk down the street now, you are bombarded by Wiener House, EDM, and hip-hop blasting from every single storefront. You cannot have a conversation anymore unless you are screaming directly into someone's ear.
It is a complete sensory overload. But it makes me wonder about the broader implications of this. When we look at this shift, it is easy to feel nostalgic and say, oh, they ruined the street, it has lost its soul. But whose soul are we actually talking about? The old 𝗛𝗢𝗡𝗘𝗬𝗖𝗢𝗠𝗔 with its backpacker hostels and Western-centric pubs, was essentially a tourist enclave. It was designed by locals, but specifically to cater to the tastes of budget-conscious Western travelers.
That is an incredibly sharp point. There is a certain irony in Western travelers mourning the loss of an authentic Vietnamese experience when the old backpacker scene was actually a highly commercialized bubble created specifically for them. Is a street that caters to local Vietnamese youth dancing to Wiener House actually more authentic to modern Saigon than a street catering to foreign backpackers reading guidebooks?
It is a fascinating philosophical question. The current version of 𝗛𝗎𝗡𝗏 is arguably a much truer reflection of modern, urban Vietnamese youth culture. It represents a generation that has more disposable income, loves high-energy music, and wants to see and be seen. It is loud, unapologetic, and incredibly vibrant. It reflects the rapid economic growth and changing aspirations of the city itself.
But at the same time, we cannot deny that something valuable was lost in the transition. The old 𝗛𝗎𝗡𝗏 was a rare space where the barrier to entry was incredibly low. Anyone could join the conversation. Today, the new model is highly commercialized in a different way. It is about bottle service, reservation tables, and loud entertainment. It is less about connection and more about consumption and spectacle. You go there to be entertained, not necessarily to meet strangers and share life stories.
That loss of low-cost social space is happening in a lot of major cities worldwide, not just Saigon. But it does leave returning travelers feeling like ghosts in a landscape they thought they knew. If you are a traveler looking for that old, relaxed, conversational vibe now, where do you even go?
Saigon's bohemian soul hasn't vanished, it just moved. As 𝗛𝗎𝗡𝗏 went high volume, the cozy vibes migrated to hidden alleys in District 3, Dachau, or District 2. Lower rent, lower decibels, same warm connections.
That is reassuring to hear. It suggests that the energy of the city is like water. When you block it in one place, it simply finds a new path. But it also means travelers have to work a little harder now. They can no longer just rely on the old recommendations in outdated travel blogs. They have to explore, ask locals, and get lost in the alleys.
And maybe that is exactly how it should be. Travel should require a bit of effort. If a place remains exactly the same for 10 years, it means the local culture is stagnant. Saigon is anything but stagnant. It is a city that thrives on motion, transformation, and relentless energy. It waits for no one.
We often want places frozen in time for our own nostalgia, but cities belong to those who live there and they need to grow, not stay still.
Exactly. Expecting a developing city to preserve a low-budget backpacker aesthetic just for our romantic notions of travel is a bit selfish. The new 𝗛𝗎𝗡𝗏𝗏 might be too loud for some of us, and we might need to pack earplugs if we dare to walk down it at midnight, but it is a living testament to Saigon's adaptability. It is wild, it is chaotic, and it is constantly reinventing itself.
Don't look for the Saigon of the past. Lean into its chaotic, electric present. 𝗛𝗎𝗡𝗏 may have changed, but it's still an unforgettable ride. Thanks for tuning in.
It was a pleasure. It is always worth looking beneath the surface of the flashing lights to understand the real human stories driving the change. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never be afraid to find a new favorite spot when the old one changes.